Hey, everybody, this is Jake Wynn, public historian, joined by my co host, Justin Voithofer from the Gettysburg Foundation. We are back again for another episode of our recaps of Masters of the Air, airing on Apple TV Plus. We are looking at episode 5 this evening, what we're going to talk about over the next 20 or so minutes. Before we get started, Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Jake. Doing well. I like to remind everybody, Jake is visiting us from overseas right now, so he is our European correspondent. So, Jake, what's the news on the ground over there?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've spent some time in London, seeing some of the sights from the Blitz, much like Major Egan in episode 4. And I'm reporting tonight from the capital of Ireland, from Dublin. So excited to be over here on the other side of the pond and still recording these episodes with you. So, well, let's dive right in and do our little episode recap. I'm going to try to keep this really short. I know I say that every time. I know Justin says that every time, but it
It's
rarely
hard
is.
to, okay? It's hard to do.
A lot happens. Uh, so this is the episode we've all been dreading. We've talked about this for a couple of weeks. The Muenster raid in October of 1943. This is we see kind of the aftermath of back-to-back raids. The 100th Bomb Group is participating in the fall of 1943. Fatigue and stress on aircraft and men is showing and creating strain on this group. And this mission itself is different. Instead of bombing U-boat pens or aircraft factories, they are going after transportation hubs in the center of a major German city, the city of Munster. And this causes a lot of tension among the group. The 8th Air Force is going to refer to these men of the 8th Air Force are going to refer to these sorts of raids as women and children bombing, knowing that they're going after not only the railroad tracks and marshaling yards in these cities, but they're also going after the workers who are employed at those factories and at these transportation links, and inevitably their families who live there as well. Major Egan is revved up for this raid. We see him, eager to get back in the skies after his buddy Buck is gone. Buck Clevin has gone down in one of the previous raids, so he's eager to get into the fight and doesn't really care about the moral implications of this. He's really about a hard war, ending this war as fast as possible. We also see Harry Crosby is now a group navigator in this episode, so he's not going to fly on this mission, which is going to prove to be very fortuitous for Crosby. We go up with the 100th Bomb Group to Munster. We specifically stay with 2 crews for most of the fighting in this episode. We're going to see Major Egan's crew and then Rosie Rosenthal as well. We're going to follow them for the rest of the raid. For Egan, that means we see his fort being destroyed before they ever get to the target. And we see what it's like to bail out of an aircraft that's falling apart at 20,000 feet. This scene was, it was pretty horrifying to watch. And then for Rosenthal, we see Egan's plane go down. We see the next bomber that takes the lead go down, and then we inevitably see the rest of the planes in the 100th Bomb Group go down, leaving only Rosenthal and his crew as the only fort to return to Thorpe Abbotts from the 100th Bomb Group. And we see some evasive action and some incredible humming that's going to get this crew back to their airbase. We also see the aftermath of this raid on the men, the officers in charge, and specifically for Harry Crosby, who loses his best friend in this and gets very emotional at trying to pack up some of his friends' items, sending it home to his loved ones. So this one is a pretty intense episode. Justin, what are some of your reactions to episode 5?
I think out of all the episodes we've had in this series, this is the one that delineates the point of no return, right? This is the halfway point of the series, and it's also that the things we're going to talk about and the stories we're going to talk about aren't going to be the same as the ones we did before. The 100th Bomb Group, as we know it from the first couple episodes, is basically ceased to exist. The people that we've kind of known, whether that be Egan or Clevin or Crosby's still there, but Egan and Clevin are now on the ground. Without spoiling too much, we get the experience of what their war is going to be like for the rest of their time in Europe, which is something I'm kind of looking forward to because we haven't been able to really see that in a while in this kind of sense. So, yeah, it's Rosie being able to make it back, and then just the realization and reminder that this is only 3 missions for them. The first 3 missions they take part in are Bremen, which is the one where Buck Cleven goes down. There's another one that they don't show during the series, Marienburg, on October 9th, and then Muenster on October 10th, which is the one that he is the only one that makes it back from. So kind of a crazy introduction to the war for him. When he actually gets on the ground after Muenster, I think he asks the intelligence officer, are all of them like this? Because they've had a pretty rough introduction to aerial warfare. But Jake, what about you? What do you think of the episode?
Yeah, I think this was just truly an amazing episode. And listening to it was hard to watch. It just, I think this is arguably harder to watch than episode three, which we talked about, being nonstop combat and action. But this feels so much harder because we've now gotten to know all of these guys. We've gotten to know them. We've gotten to care a little bit more about them, know a little more of their background. And to see what happens to them is just it's horrible. And listening to a podcast, the official podcast for Masters of the Air from the National World War II Museum, I believe it's there. They talk to the co-directors of this episode, and they talk about filming this like a horror movie. And it comes through loud and clear, from the music selection to the way that they shoot it up close. You're seeing some of the fighter action for sure, seeing what's going on outside, but you're really seeing their response, the crew's responses to all of this, and watching their eyes zip around, and the fear and horror in their faces. And it is, I think the thing that struck me most from that podcast was them describing that they used the music from The Shining, and they were playing it in the on the set as they were filming this, to set that vibe, and it comes through. I think that they executed this perfectly. I think that this is brilliantly filmed, and I also think that the story is incredibly faithful to the real experience of the 100th at Muenster. And I know we're going to get a little more into that as we kind of roll back into the history behind this episode. So with that being said, let's dive into that next section of our episode here. And Justin, let's talk a little bit more about the Muenster raid.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned at the beginning when we went over the episode, this is the first time that when they peel back the curtain, that they are bombing basically the center of a town. In Munster, it was a major marshalling yard for the railroad workers. And it's funny enough, Donner Miller will say in his book Masters of the Air, that the 8th Air Force will later try to deny it, but the center of the town is the main objective for this bombing mission. During the time, they're not trying to say, oh, we know it's the center of town. Their goal is to destroy the railroad yards and hopefully destroy as many workers as possible. With that, though, we see the hesitancy come across in the crews after the pre-flight briefing and when they're getting ready to go up. It's a Sunday. Some of them say, hey, people are going to be getting out of church at this time. And that's where Egan comes through and basically says, hey, the goal is to kill Germans, and this is what we're going to do. He's completely changed from his experience in London, from losing Cleven. And I think this is him wanting to get back and I think they mentioned during the episode, right? These aren't the people that shot down Buck Cleven, but Egan doesn't care. It's what he's came to do now. And you kind of see the result of what he went through in London played out through in this episode. So why was it so bloody? I mean, the Germans, rule of warfare that the other side can be pretty smart too. What they realize is the extent of the fighter escort for the Americans. Basically, as the bombers form up over England, the Germans have advanced warning. They have radar just like we do. They know that they're coming, and they also know that the fighter escort for them will not be able to make the whole trip. So they're able to time that up perfectly to hit the bombers at their most vulnerable point, just as that fighter escort comes kind of peels away and has to go back to base. And instead of I looked up the numbers. According to Donner Miller, there's over 250 bombers that make this raid. The Nazis, though, when they throw up about 200 fighters, instead of dispersing those fighters with all 251 bombers, they concentrate on small pockets of the American formation. And one of those pockets was the 100th Bomb Group. So the goal of those fighters is to get in there and separate the bombers, which you see in this episode. You see, once a bomber gets separated, it is prey to so many different fighter attacks from so many different angles. The first episode we talked with Greg, he talked about the importance of maintaining your formation because you maintain that kind of wall of lead that you're able to throw out there. Once you get separated, you're a lot easier to get picked off. And you see that happen to all of these different B-17s. One by one, the 100th loses one after the other ones crash into some other ones. And by the end of the day, Rosie's going to be the last one kind of standing. And I thought it was fantastic. This entire episode, I didn't time the fight scenes of it. Madonna Miller will say, based off of the records, it's within 7 minutes the 100th ceases to exist as a fighting unit. 7 minutes of fighting, and all of them but one plane are knocked out of the sky. And for Rosenthal, I mean, that is an incredible kind of ordeal to, one, realize you're all alone, and two, you see him, instead of flying back in a straight formation, take evasive action, kind of go left and right and get his guys back. Um, I want to pull up a quote that just is a testament to who he is. Remember, this is his third raid. They're not experts, they're not veterans, they're new. And this is what he goes through. He says afterwards, in a situation like that, you don't think about dying. You focus on what you have to do to save the plane and the crew. You dive in everything else out of your mind. You drive everything else out of your mind. You're frightened, but there's a difference between fear and panic. Panic paralyzes, fear energizes. You're sweating even at 50 degrees below zero. Your heart pumps, you act. Truthfully, the only fear I ever experienced in the war was the fear that I would let my crew down. And I think you see that during the episode of him trying to get his guys back. And then he does land. I mentioned it before. He looks and he says, "Oh, they all this rough." And the first time I think I've been like, okay, that's a historical inaccuracy during the show is Harry Crosby is not there on the tower when the planes come back. So you see it in his face. You see him on the tower, and they make it him and all the other commanders of the unit. He's actually on pass, much like Egan is. He is taken an RR. If you remember, you don't see it in the series, but he has a pretty nasty landing coming back from Bremen. So they give him a pass and they fly down. And before leaving, Crosby will go to the base weatherman and basically set up a phone call like you see Egan have when he asks, hey, was Buck in the starting lineup, all that kind of stuff. Goes a little bit differently, though, than Egan's phone call. Crosby writes this after the war. He says, he called Fry and asked, did all my friends get back from pass? And no answer came across the other side of the line. He asked Fry, did all of them have a permanent change of station? His code for saying, did they all get shot down? Fry answers, yes, all but one. And then in the book, Miller's book, it says, then losing his composure, Fry broke the code. Egan's gone. Your old crew is gone. The whole group is gone. The only one who came back was that new crew in the 418 squadron. They call their pilot Rosie. So that is how Crosby figures out that his best friend is down, is basically being told only one of them came back, which I hate that you don't see it. I guess you already got it with Egan. I understand they don't want to do that twice. It's kind of the same scene. So the filmmakers wanted to do something differently. So I get it. But that's been the only time during the series. Other than that, the rest of the raid is pretty spot on. I mean, even reading the accounts of when they try to jump out of the plane, Egan is looking, and I forget the co-pilot with him. It's like, hey, you have to leave first. The co-pilot's saying, no, this is my plane, even though the ranking officer, you leave first. And it wasn't until a machine gun line of bullets hit below their feet, they both realized, okay, this is dumb. Let's just get out of the plane. And then they jump out there. That actually happened in real life too. So I thought it was really well done. It was very historically accurate. It was really just a perfect episode all in that sense. Other than Crosby not being there, it was just fantastic. And I hope this is so far, this has been the best episode that I've enjoyed and kind of set the scene for. So, Jake, you have a story of the plane that we saw, but also a local connection to Pennsylvania too.
Yeah, so I know I got very excited about this. Justin can attest to this, being me
Yes, he did.
aggressively texting him when I came across this. But I started reading another book about this unit, a memoir by Frank Murphy called "Luck of the Draw," which is his memoir of service with the 100th Bomb Group. And he was on one of these planes that is lost in the Muenster raid. You hear a very brief reference to its very strange name as the crews are going up to the planes and learning which planes they're assigned. In this case, it's the Argo, and no one knows what the heck that means or who named that plane. And Frank Murphy is the navigator on board that aircraft, and he's friends with all of these individuals. Harry Crosby, Bubbles, this whole group is very tight knit and close. And Murphy is going to become a character in this, more of a character. I think he's already appeared in some scenes, kind of unidentified at this point. We're going to see him more in future episodes, most likely, especially when we get to some of these guys' experience on the ground, who survived bailing out of their aircraft and go into, spoiler alert, German prisoner of war camps. But in Murphy's memoir, he describes the downing of Argo in the Muenster raid. We see it briefly in the episode, And this is the crew that is going to, after Major Egan's bomber is shot down, this is the crew that is going to take the lead. It's under Charles Cruikshank. You hear him referred to by his nickname in the show, Crank. He's the one who actually objects to Egan about this being women and children bombing. And he and the Cruikshank crew take the lead when Egan goes down. They are able to successfully drop their bombs onto Muenster. And as they're turning back, the aircraft takes a ton of fire and is shot down. But I found as I'm reading through Frank Murphy's memoir, I found this story of a particular radio man on this bomber whose story struck me. And this is because I focus most of my writing on northeastern Pennsylvania. And this soldier, a man by the name of Orlando Vincenti from Carbondale, Pennsylvania, his story struck me. He's 23 years old. He worked as a mine worker in the vicinity of Carbondale, Pennsylvania. He was 23 years old during the Muenster raid. He was an Italian immigrant. His family, his mom brought him from Italy to Pennsylvania when he was one. And so he grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania. And when the war broke out, he goes into the U.S. Army Air Corps, wants to be a pilot, but ends up being assigned to become a radio man. And Frank Murphy gives this really eloquent description of not only a little bit about Vincenti, but also about the role of a radio operator, which we don't see much in Masters of the Air up to this point. So I think this is a good little section here. I'm going to read to you what Murphy writes about Vincenti. It says, quote, "The radio operator, who would be one of the permanent members of the crew, was Technical Sergeant Orlando Vincenti, a quiet, intelligent, soft-spoken, polite fellow from Carbondale, Pennsylvania. He possessed intelligent brown eyes and an easy smile. During our long association, I never heard him use profanity, raise his voice to anyone, or lose his self-control. His goal, he said, was to complete his combat tour, enter the Army aviation cadet program, and become a pilot. The radio operator on a B-17 aircraft was one of two highly trained and specialized non-commissioned officers of the crew, the other being the flight engineer, the flying crew chief. The radio operator was the airplane's contact with the outside world. Although he principally operated the long-range HF liaison radio set, through his several radio sets came all orders, warnings, changes, and other messages. Out through his radios went all messages from the ship and its crew. Orlando Vincenti had completed the USAAF rigorous 18-week radio school. He was first-rate in his understanding of everything from Morse code and code typing to direct and alternating current circuits, transmitters, and receivers, and he could operate and repair every piece of the extensive radio equipment on a B-17. Unfortunately for Vincenti, he's going to be one of two crew members on board the Argo when it is struck that is not going to make it out. Frank Murphy describes in his book bailing out of the aircraft and having similar situation to Major Egan, nearly being run into by a Messerschmitt as he's falling out of the sky. And he's going to, Murphy's going to successfully land. He's going to watch as his plane explodes into pieces and crashes to the ground. Vincenti was last seen in the radio room trying to fight a fire caused by German cannon fire from fighters. And he was found inside the center of the aircraft, inside the fuselage when it struck the ground. As German civilians and police officers are going to find him and the tail gunner, a gentleman by the name of Charles Murphy, also inside the aircraft. All the other 8 members of the crew parachute to the ground safely and survive their fall to earth, going to German POW camps. But Vincenti and Murphy are buried in the local Catholic cemetery near a small town near Muenster, and then they were both later repatriated to the United States, reburied in their hometowns, Murphy in Illinois and Vincenti in Carbondale, or in northeastern Pennsylvania near Carbondale. I bring that story up just because I found this, fascinating that we have, this show is starting to peel back these layers of learning about these men and these crew, but the more you peel back, the more you find, and the more stories there are like this. And even as you're seeing all of this taking place, the show can never show you all of the complexity of this and all of the different characters that are involved in this story. So I found that Vincenti's story really struck me, and I wrote about it with pictures of him as well, which are quite. There's some really great images, including one photograph from the previous Regensburg raid. This is the aircraft, the crew, Charles Cruikshank's crew is the one that Major Egan rides in on the Regensburg raid. And there's a photograph of Egan and the whole crew coming back in England, and they're all wearing fezzes that they picked up while they were in North Africa at the end of the Regensburg raid. So if you're interested in learning more about this or reading more of it, seeing some of these images as well, I definitely recommend checking out the blog. I'll put it into the comments of this particular video. So, Justin, I know I went on for a long time there. We've now crossed the halfway mark with Masters of the Air. So how are you feeling about the show so far?
I mean, if the series ended today, I'd be satisfied, which I think it's good. I think we get a good sense, and I look forward to the next couple episodes. I look forward to the Tuskegee Airmen. I don't know how they're going to loop them in. I'm hoping that it's seamless. I'm hoping that it's not feeling like that's rushed. But I'm also looking forward to what the experience of a POW camp was like in the ETO. We haven't really had a on-screen representation, at least that I know of, really since The Great Escape, the 1960s, escapee movie sort of thing. Every other prisoner of war kind of thing, experience-wise, when I think of it, I think of Unbroken in the Pacific and everything like that. I don't really think of any other ETO POW camp representation. So kind of looking forward to that. But Jake, how about you?
Yeah, I think that this has become it's right up there with my favorite period pieces about the Second World War. I would say it's a close second to Band of Brothers. I'm kind of going through my I'd say annual, but I really watch probably Band of Brothers more than once a year.
Right.
It's something I just go back to time and time again. It's such an amazing piece of filmmaking. And I would say that this is not quite at that level. I think that that's almost unattainable. But this is very, very good. And a show that is blending in all of the CGI necessary to make this, to tell this story. They are blending it in so well. It's almost seamless, and I'm very impressed. And I think they've done a great job with developing these characters by now, by episode 5, and that's allowing us to really unpack the experiences of these men. And now that, as you mentioned, Justin, as we see these guys kind of now scattered all over Europe and landing in POW camps and escaping as well, we're seeing all of these different perspectives that we have not really seen on screen before or recently. So I think that this is it's very well done. The history is almost flawless, and I think that they take some liberties to tell the story, as you mentioned with the story of Crosby. But this is some of the best I've ever seen, and I'm excited to continue to see the story play out, and knowing where some of these men are going to end up and the experiences they're going to go through. I know that there is some amazing story material to visualize and show what this experience, these harrowing experiences, must have been like. So I have to say I'm really looking forward to the last 4 episodes. Now that we're over the hump, we're heading into the back end of the war and the back end of these men's war experiences. But for some of these men, the worst is yet to come. So,
Right. Right.
Any other thoughts, Justin, before we sign off?
No, I think this has been good. Thank you all for sticking along for over half the series so far. And please continue to like, subscribe, and do all those things that you need to do to just validate that this is a good idea for us. I mean, Jake and I talked about it. We've had a great time sitting here talking about it. Even if no one watches it, I think we're still going to continue doing it. So we appreciate people watching it and leaving their feedback too.
Yep, starting to see some comments come through on previous videos as well. So thank you for doing that. Please continue to engage, and I'll try to be better about engaging back with some of those comments as well. But as Justin said, thank you all so much for watching, and we're going to continue making these videos, whether you like it or not. And we'll see you in future episodes. And yeah, please drop us a line if you have any questions or anything you want to elaborate on, or just yell at us because we said something wrong.
Right.
We're all ears. So, but thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you next time.